You're about to listen to a brand new episode of Curious Cases. Shows are going to be released weekly, wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're in the UK, you can listen to the latest episodes first on BBC Sounds. I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science. Hello and welcome to a special edition of Curious Cases where we're going to do things a little bit differently because Dara and I are currently in the BBC Radio Theatre at London's Broadcasting House, and as you can probably hear, we have an audience.
And there's another thing we're doing differently as well.
There certainly is.
There is nowhere, because normally in an episode of Curious Cases, we take one question for the entire show.
Absolutely.
We're not doing that tonight.
We are not doing that tonight. We are going to tackle quite a few of your questions on one single theme, space mysteries.
Yes.
And to help us out, we have called on some people who know their way around the universe, the presenters from the BBC TV show, The Sky at Night.
Yes, the longest-running science programme in the world. 68 years old, The Sky at Night is now. Please, Sky at Night, introduce yourselves.
I'm Maggie Adair-Pocock. I'm a space scientist and a science communicator, and I've specialised in building instrumentation, so machines that go into space and help us understand the universe. And these have included the James Webb Space Telescope, the largest space telescope ever built, but also ground-based telescopes like the Gemini Telescope in South America.
I am George Dransfield. I am an astrophysicist. I specialise in exoplanets, so planets outside the solar system. In particular, I'm interested in gas giants, in particular ones that are kind of warm and closer to their star than, for example, Jupiter and Saturn are.
And I'm Chris Lintar. I'm a part-time alien hunter, full-time distractible astronomer. Spent most of the summer worrying about the oldest comet we've ever seen, which is paying a sudden visit to our solar system.
Wow, what amazing guests for this evening. Welcome to all of you. You know how special The Sky at Night is, Dara? They had an asteroid named after them. What was it called, your asteroid?
It's asteroid 57424 Calum Noctu, which is sort of Latin for the sky at night, but the number was the broadcast date of the first episode. And it looks like a dot. I've seen it in a telescope.
Calum Noctu, that sounds very fancy, doesn't it? I looked up what Curious Cases would be if it was in Latin.
What is it?
Curiosa caecibus, which I think, frankly, sounds like a venereal disease. So maybe they'll name one of those after us, Dara.
You know what? I kind of need one because I've got one named after me.
Have you?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, really? Am I the only one?
Sorry to pull rank in the room, but it's asteroid 4901, and it's just called O'Brien, which is Latin for O'Brien.
Also, if you know any astronomers, almost everyone I know who has an asteroid. It's also, that number is also their PIN number. So it's a very useful thing to ask astronomers.
What does yours look like through a telescope?
Mine is the binary system.
You're just showing it.
I mean, I was kind of forced into it, but it is very much my brag. It's a really interesting system, actually. It's like the one that they used to test whether you could dent a asteroid off course by making something crash into it. And also, it's not going to wipe out life on Earth. That's an upside.
Yeah, that's also a flex.
Yeah. Dara O'Brien's coming in, he's going to wipe out the Earth. It's not good.
I don't think you'd get one really good week of publicity out of it.
After that, it's downhill.
And, honestly, I've been booked on everything. Like, Graham Norton finally returned my calls. Are we ever going to run out of mysteries in space?
No.
I mean, I can't see how he can. Space is everything apart from planet Earth, and that is a very big playground.
It's also expanding, so it is getting bigger. So the mystery density is dropping, but presumably there are more bubbling up out of the quantum ether. So
We're also
I think
getting bigger telescopes, right?
That's true.
So that means that we are detecting new mysteries that we couldn't see before. So as long as we keep building bigger telescopes, we'll get new mysteries.
Your racket is going to keep going for a while then, isn't it, guys?
yeah, 68 years, still going.
OK, for the past few weeks, we've been asking you to send in your questions about space mysteries, and we're kicking off with Ariane in Ireland, who asked, what sound do stars make? Big shout out to the literalists who'll go, oh, it's space. There's no sound in space, like whatever. George, why is this a brilliant question?
because stars make sounds. They have sound waves traveling through them, and we actually detect these sound waves on the surface of stars. And the field of study of this is called astroseismology. We can look at the waves as we detect them, and it tells us something about how big a star is, or what it's made of, or how dense it is. Unfortunately, because of the vacuum of space and all, those sound waves can't travel to us as sound waves, but you can detect them still by looking at the light. It makes the star wobble, it makes the starlight wobble. So it's pretty cool.
And do we ever turn those measurements into a sound wave we can hear?
Yeah, absolutely. So a really good way to interpret anything that's a wave is to use a process called sonification, where you just take any wave and you say, this is what it would sound like if it was a sound wave of the same kind of shape and frequency. So yeah, sonification of stars is definitely a thing.
You've brought in some different forms of intergalactic audio to play for it. Maggie, what did you bring in?
I wanted to actually go for something that is actually a sound.
Yeah.
The Cassini-Huygens space mission was a mission to Saturn. And Cassini went in orbit around Saturn, got some great data. But Huygens was a little probe, and it actually landed on this moon, Titan. And as it fell through the atmosphere, because there was a medium to carry the sound, we could actually listen to it. And I think this is a small section of the end as actually sort of lands.
So I am, as always in these situations, wary of building it up too much.
I know. I know.
Take a moment. I've not heard this, but I'm taking a wild guess that everyone's probably imagining something maybe more majestic than we're about to play here. That's going to be right.
Come on,
It's okay.
Yeah, okay. So this is the sound of the Huygens probe landing on Titan.
Manage your expectations, everybody.
That was not what I was expecting at all.
You see? So I think it's the last sort of few minutes as it sort of lands and settles on Titan. But it is a real sound, which I find it really exciting.
No. That was very good. That was very good. Can we turn this into a competitive thing?
Ooh.
All right.
I'm giving that a 7 out of 10.
All right, George, what sound did you choose?
Can we hear mine first and then see if you can figure out what it is?
Oh,
twist.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, here it is.
Was it a space elephant?
No.
Was it a buried choir?
So to me, that sounds like utter despair.
Yeah.
It's
not an upbeat noise.
Right? Yeah, it's nowhere near as upbeat as Maggie's. This is actually a sonification of a black hole at the center of a galaxy cluster. And so, like, if you can picture those really cool images that we have of black holes, what they've done is kind of like swept around and made the profile of the wave into a sound. So this is the sound of kind of sweeping around a black hole. And it just sounds like the despair at the end of the universe.
Absolutely.
Yay!
Actual noise of spaghettification as something's being ripped apart by a black hole. I mean, you're not going to be upbeat in that situation, are you?
No, exactly.
Right.
It's the right kind of sound for it.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what, George? Nothing says light entertainment like the impending death of falling into a black hole. So, I'm going to give you an 8 out of 10.
So did I. I got 8 out of 10.
Damn, upbeat and chirpy, never wins.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The sense of your existential despair that we got from that was too good. Chris, what have you brought?
Well, I thought we'd go for the grandest and most important sound of all. So just after the Big Bang, when the universe was in a hot, dense state, there was enough matter around that you could have sound waves propagating through the universe. And we can still see the effects of this in something called the cosmic microwave background, which is the oldest light of all. So we know what sound waves were there, and we can work out what the spectrum is. And so that means we can play the whole universe as an instrument.
Look,
and so that is the big sound.
He's built it up. He's built it up. Go on then.
So this is the whole universe as an instrument. Good, isn't it?
It's sort of space ASMR.
Yeah, you can work to this. So the reason it sounds terrible is that you had all these frequencies at once. So the point is the universe didn't just have one note playing, it was all of them. So you get this sort of white noise. But that was the whole universe.
Well, 10 for honesty.
Yeah, but for sound, I think you oversold it.
I think George wins on that round.
I think
entirely.
George wins. Do you agree, everybody? Yeah, there we go. Very good.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. All right. Next up, we've got a question from one of our younger listeners. See what you make of this.
Hello, my name is Marlon. I'm 11 and I live in Croydon. My curious question came to mind when I was watching a YouTube video about the edge of space, and I thought it was an interesting but complex subject. What is the edge of space? What's it made of, and how can we perceive it? Space must have an edge if it's expanding, right? But then how can it be infinite?
Deep.
Okay.
Marlon is already the boss level of this.
No. All right, Maggie, then what is the edge of space? I mean, give us like at least a rope barrier and a bouncer.
Yes,
You know
yes.
what I mean? That's what I want.
The answer is we don't know. There. But I think it's trying to understand sort of the concept of the universe. Our current understanding of the universe is it began with something called the Big Bang. So it's sort of a singularity expanded out to create space and time. And so if you ask what is beyond space and time, it's a very hard concept to grapple. And so we don't really know what it's expanding into, we don't know where its limits are. And with things like the James Webb Space Telescope, we look at sort of light coming from the early universe, but we can't go beyond that because the light won't reach us, if you see what I mean. So yes, we are limited in what we know and what we can see. We believe it's expanding outwards, but into what we have no idea.
Any guesses, though, Chris?
Well, we do have this edge to the observable universe. So as long as you're a practical astronomer, this question's easy to answer because the edge of the observable universe is the bit whose light is only just reaching us. So we can see the bit of the universe which in the last 13.8 billion years has had time to send us light. And that's, you could put a line around that. If we froze the expansion of the universe, we can say what part of the universe that is. The problem is that we think that's a tiny fraction of the whole.
Why?
And,
What makes you say
because
that?
various features of our universe make more sense if it's a tiny fraction of the whole. So, for example, if you cut the universe in two, if you pick any angle and you just slice the universe in two, the top half will look much like the bottom half. Everything we can measure about the top half on the largest scales matches the bottom half. So we seem to have this uniform universe. And that makes much more sense if we're a tiny part of a whole, because you wouldn't expect large-scale variation. So it's a guess, but the guess is that we live in this tiny fraction of the whole. So we've got this little bubble that we can see. That has an edge. But the whole thing, well, that could easily be infinite. And the thing that's impossible to get your head around is the idea that our universe could have started in this Big Bang, this point in time, but it could have been infinite then and it could still be infinite now, and it's expanding ever since. And I get asked this question almost every time I give a talk, and I don't have an intuitive answer to it. It's just the maths tells us that.
Wow. Great question. Unsatisfying answer.
Yes, I know. So essentially, there's a fog around us. We have a torch. We can shine the torch far. And so the limit of how far we can shine the torch is our observable universe. But what's in the fog area outside, we have no idea.
We've no idea. We assume it's the same because we assume that we've got a representative sample. Yeah. But it's possible that the universe could, on very large scales, be very different. There could be empty bits or very dense bits or so on. But we have to assume that our bit's typical, because otherwise we can't make any progress.
Can I ask a related question? Because we had a lot of cosmological questions. This one is from Stephen.
Hello, Hannah, Dara, and Sky at Night team. This is Stephen from Glasgow. When everything was created in the Big Bang, it all exploded outward and is still going. So why is the universe not shaped like a big donut with nothing in the middle?
Yeah, that's because there's no central point, presumably. There's no one central point that we pushed away from.
I think the idea of an explosion is a bit of a misnomer, a bit of a misunderstanding.
You have been saying explosion for 80 years now. You've been going on
Big
about
Bang.
You chose the name. You
Rapid
collectively
expansion.
settled on this.
Rapid expansion, not explosion.
You see, it's explosion and fires are... And you sort of, the matter starts here and then it's thrown outwards.
Yeah.
But I think this is sort of the singularity expands rapidly, but it expands outwards. So it isn't like an explosion where all the matter that was there is thrown outwards. The matter itself is expanding outwards. So then it's less likely to be a donut, a toroid. It's more likely to be a sort of a continuum expanding outwards.
So people sometimes talk about if you have bread in an oven and it expands, you think about if there are raisins in the bread, the raisins get further apart. Of course, the bread has an edge, so that's not a great analogy. But on the name, the BBC is to blame for the name, the fact it's called the Big Bang. In this very building, Fred Hoyle in 1948, I think, Fred Hoyle was the Cambridge astronomer who didn't believe in the Big Bang theory, and he gave a talk about modern cosmology on the radio, and he wanted to disparage it. So he said, this Big Bang Theory, and the name stuck.
Yeah.
So it was
So it was an
actually
insult.
named by the theory's opponent, so it's his fault.
Probably in this room.
Yeah, perhaps.
Throwing shade he was.
That's
That's
right.
me.
Yeah. But it's so memorable, so it stuck in the 90s. An American astronomy magazine got so fed up with this explosion problem that they had a competition for people to suggest other names for the Big Bang. And about
Bangy McBang.
Yeah. That's what would happen now. But 10,000 people wrote in, and at the end they had an expert panel judge them, and they decided that Big Bang was the least worst name, and so Big Bang won, with horrendous space kablooey was second, which still has the explosion problem.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not an explosion; it's a stretching of space.
A donut is different to a sphere because its curvature is different. We can estimate the curvature of space. Is it donut-shaped?
Well, there is such a thing as the toroidal universe theory.
Toroidal as much as you want.
Let's call it the donut universe theory. Like, there is a theory about this, right? The four-dimensional fabric of space-time, people do actually research, is it flat, is it curved? And if it's curved, is it like a saddle? Is it open, is it closed? And some people think that it might be shaped like a donut, a torus, which is pretty cool, because then it means that, like, as you travel through the universe, eventually you'd come back in yourself, like if you're inside a video game, and it's like, you can kind of go in a loop.
But it's important to say that we know that if it's a donut, it's a very big donut, and
Very
that we
big.
live only on a small part of the donut.
Yeah.
So we're not ruling out the donut.
We're not, but when we measure whether our space is curved, the bit of the universe we can see is pretty flat.
Yep.
And so therefore, for it to be on a donut, we have to only have a tiny bit of the donut. The same way that if we were on a sphere, we must be on a tiny bit of the sphere, so we don't notice the curvature. So you can have these exotic shapes, your donuts or your crumpets or whatever it is that you want the universe to be like, but we only see a tiny bit of it.
Are we eliminating that we would be able to, like an ant on a football, walk all the way around it and find ourselves back at the same point?
So, I mean, like Chris says, we can't fully rule it out, but it's really unlikely because, everything that we look at so far, it looks like space-time is flat. So either the universe really is so much bigger than we can even imagine, or it's flat as a pancake, so we should go for pancake universe.
I really like the idea that in maybe 100 years' time, people will be sitting in this theatre and going, no, they call it a pancake universe because the BBC...
It wasn't an insult, actually.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so maybe a donut, maybe a pancake, definitely some sort of baked good. All right. We have another question here.
This one came in from Keith.
Hello, my name is Keith and I'm from Liverpool. My question is, what would happen to the universe if the speed of light were to increase or decrease? This came from a discussion about how disappointing it is that physics seems to rule out interstellar travel. Then we thought, if light travelled more quickly, space travel would be faster and engines would be more powerful. But I suspect it would have some downsides too.
I love the dryness of that. I mean, it might have some downsides if you change one of the fundamental constants of the universe. Like, I can't really work out, but there's bound to be some causation to that. What would happen to the universe if it were to increase and decrease? And actually, if it were just different, in what way would our universe be different?
So what Chris was talking about, sort of this sphere of things that we can look at, because it takes a finite time for light to leave them and travel to us. That's sort of the envelope we're seeing at the moment. Now, if we change the speed of light, of course, if we make it bigger, then that light can travel from further afield, so we can see more of the universe. If you make it smaller, then that sphere gets smaller because the light takes longer to get to us. But also, as you say, it's one of the fundamental constants of the universe. And as a physicist, we rely on this because otherwise, what else do we have?
Yeah, but is there no reason for it to be 3 by 10 to the 8 metres per second?
No, we don't know why the speed of light is what it is. It's just, we know relativity requires that it be constant. But the real problem, to answer the question that we got, if you change the speed of light, you upset the balance of forces that keep stars together. Because stars are in this constant battle between gravity pulling them together and light generated at the centre pushing outwards. So if you upset that, even by changing the speed of light a bit and some of the other constants a bit, then stars don't exist. So that's bad for the universe. However, it would make for better science fiction. I have to tell this story because this instinct from the questioner that everything would be more fun if we could travel faster than the speed of light. It's spot on. And there's a great story from the early days of Star Trek where Gene Roddenberry, the producer, got this letter from a fan which said, look, I don't really understand what happened because on episode 1, the shuttles moved at this speed, and then 3 episodes later, they could go faster. So what is the maximum speed of a shuttle that the Enterprise carries? And Roddenberry wrote back and said, it's very simple. The shuttles travel at the speed of plot. And so as a physicist, I think that's the fundamental rule of the universe.
No. So let me make sure I understand this then. So speed of light, slightly slower, bad, nothing we know or love exists.
Yeah.
Slightly faster, bad, nothing we know or love
If
exists.
you don't change gravity as well.
Right,
yeah, it's
okay.
The balance between the two.
Current speed,
Pretty
inconvenient for science fiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
where
that's
we're
why
at.
we need to change it.
We can find workarounds. There are sort of ideas, like the Alcubierre drive, for instance, where you keep still, but you warp space and time around you. It takes huge amounts of energy. So we're not doing it tomorrow, but there are ways of sort of wormholes and all sorts of lovely ideas, which science fiction lean into beautifully.
Yeah, because I've never got from people who actually work in this field that you sit in cinemas tutting loudly at the screen going, well, that wouldn't happen. You know that wouldn't happen. Did you know that? And like shaking at the people beside you going, this is nonsense. Yeah. You don't do that any more than anyone else does. Like, whatever. You presumably enjoy a science fiction romp the same as anyone else.
I can suspend my disbelief unless it's really, really painful.
Do you object?
For me, it's just the messing with physics. So, like, if we're doing straight fantasy, like, you know, if there's people who fly, if there is magic, that is fine. I just don't want them to interfere with physics. So,
You're
yeah.
fine with the impossible, just not with the implausible.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to know what the best astronomical blooper of all time is in a film? The kind of thing that would get me nudging the person next to me in the cinema? In Titanic. When the Titanic's sinking, they picked a random sky background, and so you can work out that it's April and they're in the Caribbean based on the stars, which completely changes the film.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson complained to James Cameron about precisely that. And they did a new director's cut with the correct sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the lengths you go
isn't it?
to shut up the person in the cinema going, did you know the stars are wrong? Fine, we'll change them.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, you started off by saying that you're a part-time alien hunter. And so we obviously cannot do a show on space mysteries without talking about aliens. Here we go.
Hello, it's Richard from Whitley Bay. Venus and Jupiter are deemed unsuitable for life, but aren't there points in the upper atmospheres where the temperatures and pressures are similar to where life is found on Earth? Could airship drones be sent to look for exotic simple forms of life?
So there's two parts to this. Might there be exotic life forms on these planets? And also, how would we find them? He mentioned, George, what exactly are airship drones? And why would we be sending them to Jupiter or Venus?
Think a balloon. They're kind of robotic and you can operate them like drones remotely. And actually, I think NASA are planning something like this for Venus at least because they want to measure what's there. And the question is actually right. There are areas where the temperature and pressure might be kind of Earth similar. So at least for Venus, people were talking about maybe some microbial life having colonized the atmosphere. I think the issue, though, maybe with sending something like this to Jupiter is that it very rapidly, like the pressure gets out of hand. So, you know, the whole thing would just...
That's the technical term.
It is the technical term. I think for Venus, like you've also got to be careful. It's a bit acidic. So yeah, it's, you got to design your airship drone pretty carefully.
I mean, you're basically trying to float a hot air balloon over a death planet. That's
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
But there is this layer in Venus's atmosphere which is about room temperature and pressure. It's still acidic, as you say, and that's the layer that Jane Greaves a few years ago announced that she'd found a chemical called phosphine in. And phosphine on Earth is made mostly, frankly, by penguins. It's a biosignature. It's made by life. It's in penguin poo, amongst other things. And so the fact that we found it on Venus, maybe it's the product of some volcanism or some weird chemical process, but it could also be life hanging on in this
Venus
region.
penguins?
Venus penguins. Very, very small Venus penguins.
Venus penguin farts specifically.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are these regions, and it makes you wonder about what it is when we say we need conditions like Earth. Does that count? You've got room temperature and pressure, but it's acidic. In Jupiter, we rule it out because there's no oxygen, but it'd be nice to believe that life was creative enough.
Well, actually, but the thing is, life could be so varied or so different from what we anticipate. In fact, just to name drop, I did have this conversation with David Attenborough once.
Sure.
I know,
Sure.
as you do. I feel terrible because I was having an argument with our national treasure and saying that I don't know if we actually need water for life. Life as we know it, yes, but maybe not life not as we know it. Now we're looking at some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and that's because we found life in places like the Mariana Trench, 11 kilometres below sea level, where sunlight can't penetrate, so we thought there could be no life here. So I think we need to be very careful how we define life. There might be a whole variety of life that we just don't anticipate.
I don't want microbes, though. I want little green men,
I know,
Chris.
people to talk to, basically. This is the trouble.
Communicate.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that's happening is if you think about an astronomer looking for life in the universe, that comes from a logic about deliberate communication. And what we're trying to do now is look for sort of accidental evidence for life. You know, if there's a civilization that's built giant solar panels orbiting their star, can we see the effect on the star? If they're mining their asteroid belt, can we detect that? All of these, they're called technosignatures. And looking for that gives us a new way to try and imagine how we might find life.
Because I guess there is a conundrum there, right? That when we turned on the satellites, when we turned on the opportunity to listen into space, it was strange that there wasn't a cacophony of sounds.
Yes, I think the space age was a bit of a disappointment that we found that Mars just had craters, that Venus was this hellhole and so on. And I think people just expect it to be obvious that there was life in the cosmos, and it's not, but the universe is a big place.
Actually, just a tiny sort of diversion. Last time I met David Attenborough, I was because we were both doing the pre-Christmas selling books on radio interviews, and we're sitting in a waiting room in Radio 2, and I had some kids' book out for about space, and when he sat down, we were chatting about it, and I said, by the way, I should tell you, the book I've written, it has some stuff about animals in it. And Attenborough genuinely leaned in and went, "You have planets, I have animals."
That's good.
Look, one final proper question there. I know we've all traded our Attenborough stories. If you were given unlimited funds to try to find life, where would it be?
So I would make a really big telescope and I would aim it at one of those lovely exoplanets we've been working so hard to discover in the habitable zones of their stars. So far, we've not found a single one of these kind of rocky ones that actually has an atmosphere. But, once we do find one...
And in the hope that we would see the gases in the atmosphere that would...
Yeah, so we'd be looking for biosignatures, definitely.
Penguin farts.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We want to find phosphine on a rocky exoplanet.
What if the penguins have been holding it in?
Deflating.
I mean, so that it is...
Or they only poo on the other side of the planet.
We find a planet that's rotating and isn't tidally locked with a star.
Dara, you started this by saying, are there always more mysteries in space? I think we found some new ones.
It's on this very show.
That is almost all we have time for. Have we solved anything? Have you think so?
No.
That's astronomy.
Do we ever really solve anything?
No, but look, they've been going for 68 years. They need to go for another 68, so that's fine by me.
There, absolutely. On that note, a huge thank you to our curious questioners, our wonderful audience here at London's BBC Radio Theatre, and of course, our fantastically starry panel of Sky at Night presenters, George Dransfield, Chris Lintott, and Maggie Adairn Pocock. Subscribe to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and make sure you've got push notifications turned on, and we'll let you know as soon as new episodes are available.
Who's in the news for all the wrong reasons? Step inside the world of crisis management and so-called spin doctors with me, David Yelland.
And me, Simon Lewis. In our podcast from BBC Radio 4, we tell you what's really going on behind the scenes as the week's biggest PR disasters unfold.
Simon and I used to be on opposite sides of a story in the media when I was editor of The Sun and Simon was communications secretary to the late Queen. Now we've teamed up to share everything we know about what's keeping those big stories in and out of the press.
As the great philosopher king Mike Tyson himself once said, everyone has a plan until they're punched in the mouth.
And there's a lot of people punching people in the mouth in this town.
Listen and subscribe to When It Hits the Fan on BBC Sounds.
This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science.
Hannah.
Yes.
How are you on like a nice mushroom risotto?
I'd say medium.
How do you feel about a nice yeasty beer?
I mean, you didn't make it sound that nice when you said yeasty.
Yeah, I think I leaned into yeasty, but that is kind of where we're getting at here.
Less keen.
Okay, then for the last of this trinity, a nice batch of athlete's foot.
I would say you really are sliding down the scale. I thought mushroom risotto was the bad end, but no.
No, that was supposed to be the lure. And then no.
Okay.
The point is they're all made of fungi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Are we doing an entire episode on yeast infections?
No, we are not. It's about things that are made with fungi.
Of all of the different ways that you could have introduced this programme, I'm so pleased that was one you went
And
for.
it easily will be the last mention of risotto, yeasty beer or athlete's foot. And we're just showing the broad range, how variable fungus are.
I tell you what I want to do. I want to hear the clip from the listener. I want to hear your raw material, so I know what you used to come up with that intro.
Okay, what I'm trying to introduce came from a listener called Alexis.
Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm from Arrington. So I'd like to know how much of what we have in the home could be grown using fungi or materials from fungi. So I don't use fungi products, apart from eating them, but I'm so intrigued to see how things are going to advance and the technologies are going to advance with fungi.
Athlete's foot.
Yeah. Okay. Look, obviously, we have to eliminate quickly the thought that Alexis is in fact a gnome.
Sure. I like the idea that she's just calling us in from her toadstool.
Oh, so sweet. With a little fishing rod.
Yeah.
And as she listens to the show, she's fishing for whatever they
little
fish
red
for
and
in
white
gardens.
one.
Little red and white one, like. But would you like to think that where you're living is made of mushrooms?
I mean, as long as I don't have to eat them or...
No, you don't have to eat your way in and eat your way out. Like, it's not like...
It just feels a bit gross, doesn't it? I don't know why.
And yet, a lovely mushroom. Lovely on top of pizza. Very nice. Very nice.
This isn't about the aesthetics of mushrooms, though, is it? This is about the functional uses.
Absolutely. Their utility. And the fact that we may be able to create really, really interesting materials with them.
Would you live in a mushroom house?
Well, I mean, if it's like literally a giant mushroom with a door in it and you go in and you hear tip, 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 and the footsteps and then they appear at the top on the crown, yeah, that'd be amazing. That'd be lovely. But I'd be the only one on my road. I mean, it'd be tough to get the planning permission for that.
It certainly would. Well, joining us to build mushroom houses today, we have Phil Ayres, who is the Professor of Biohybrid Architecture at the Royal Danish Academy.
And Katie Field, Professor of Plant Soil Processes at the University of Sheffield. Katie, we need a fungal 101, essentially. And I would say that a lot of this is because of its, fungi have a kind of a bad press. It's damp, it's dark. What's that growing?
Yeah, completely unwarranted, of course. So the kingdom of fungi, and it is its own kingdom, right? So a lot of people just think that it's part of plants, and historically fungi have been classified as plants. But yeah, they're their own kingdom and they're suitably diverse. In terms of numbers of species, we know about and have described just over 100,000. But actually, the best estimates suggest there's probably about 6 million plus.
Whoa.
Right? So we only know about a very small fraction of species of fungi.
Is one of those species a red and white toadstool?
Yes.
Does it
absolutely
actually exist for real?
Oh my goodness, yes. An Amanita. Yes, Amanita muscoides. Yeah, fabulous. Fly agaric.
Where do they grow them?
In woodlands, all over the place. You just need to walk through the woodlands.
In the UK?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, loads. There's loads of them in the Peak District.
Quite literally do need to get out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They're fascinating. Obviously, don't eat them. They're a bit toxic. But actually foxes nibble them and they kind of get a bit of a hallucinogenic rush from them. Yeah. So you can find all these spaced out foxes.
Because what you want from foxes is even worse behaviour and even less accountable activities.
Psychedelic foxes.
Yeah.
So one other Fungus 101. Do they grow out of corpses?
I guess if you leave a corpse out long enough, the fungal kingdom encompasses some really important environmentally relevant groups, and part of that is the decomposers. All right, and without these decomposing fungi, we'd be buried in detritus, so dead bodies, leaf litter, dead plants, everything.
So fungus is basically the machinery that tidies all that up.
Yeah. Well, they're the primary decomposers, so you do get a bit of bacterial stuff, but fungi are the main powerhouses of decomposition in the natural environment. So they're unlike. I always think of fungi more as like alien life forms. They're not. You cannot relate to a fungus. Okay, so it doesn't eat in the same way that we eat. So it doesn't eat something at one end and then pass it out the other end.
Yeah.
Okay, they grow through their food, right? So as it would almost be like, for me, I would like to live in ice cream and just eat my way through a swimming pool of ice cream, and that would be my life.
But you would become the swimming pool of ice
cream. If only. So a fungus will grow through its food and it'll digest it from the tips of the hyphae. So that's the long filaments that make up the main vegetative body of the fungus. And it'll digest stuff. It secretes enzymes that decompose organic material, and then it'll assimilate all of those nutrients that are coming out of what it's digested. And then it'll just build more fungus. It'll build more hyphal mycelium, and it'll grow and branch and form this massively complex network. And as hyphae sort of turn over, so they die and retract, you're left with fungal skeletons almost, like the really strong cell walls that make up fungal filaments are left behind. And that kind of, in a way, it locks carbon up within soils or decaying stuff in a way, because it's very hard to degrade that tough skeleton of the fungus, if you like.
The question was about mushrooms, right? And now we're talking about funguses or fungi. What's the relation between one and the other? Are like all mushrooms fungi and not all fungi mushrooms?
So all mushrooms are fungi. Okay, so the main body of a fungus is the mycelium, and that is the thread-like filamentous network that forms the main body of it. That's what does the eating, that's what does the growing and colonizing new areas. And when the conditions are right, the fungus will, or some groups of fungi will produce a mushroom. And the mushroom is the reproductive fruiting body, if you like, of the fungus.
The whole thing, both the stalk and the head.
Absolutely.
Or the crown.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge diversity, again, in formation and structure of mushrooms. Some of them have stalks, like your classic toadstool mushroom. Others don't, and they grow like brackets on a tree. You've probably seen bracket fungi. There's also ones that look like bits of coal. There's a huge diversity of mushrooms, but they're all the fruiting bodies. But what I think is really mind-blowing is that when you see a mushroom and you think like, oh, I've seen a fungus, that is just the tip of the iceberg for that organism. There's probably hundreds of meters of hyphae associated with that mushroom. That's actually the main part of the fungus.
So hang on, so if you're farming for mushrooms, is there kind of a huge plant from which you are drawing the mushrooms that we would get in a little punnet and then we'd stick into our pasta? They're all the fruit that are taken off a larger...
Absolutely. So the sort of mushroom farms where you get your supermarket mushrooms, I'm thinking the little button mushrooms.
Yeah.
So the fungus that's responsible for producing those is a decomposer, so it doesn't need a living plant to live. So essentially it'll be growing in a tray of what is unrotted compost. It's just sort of, plant detritus. And then when you'll be growing it in conditions that will suit the growth of the mycelium, but then it'll produce fruit. You want it to spore.
You remember earlier on how I said there was something a bit gross about mushrooms? I'd like to double down on that comment.
They've bad
Absolutely
PR,
not.
but they've bad
They're not
public
gross.
relations.
No, I think people associate fungi with a sort of decay and disease, right? And that isn't fair. That is just one of their functions. We need to be more thinking about them as sort of engineers of the world around us, right? I mean, we could even go as far as to say that without fungi, we wouldn't be here today. There would be no plants, there would be no atmosphere that we could breathe. So really, we owe a lot to fungi.
I mean, Team Fungus over here. Goodness me. Okay. Okay, well, somebody else who's on Team Fungus, Phil, I know that you're an architect, right? I know that you're trying to do some quite surprising things with fungi that don't involve making risottos. Can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Yeah, so we're looking at trying to create new kinds of materials using fungi as a binder. So we have particles of dead matter, typically wood, and the fungus will grow through that and bind it. And from there, we can create functional material units.
Let me understand this, though. Okay, so you say you take dead wood. Are we talking like sawdust here?
Exactly,
So
yeah.
get some sawdust, and then what do you actually do with it?
So if you've ever made bread, the recipe is similar. So what you're doing is you're taking your sawdust, you're adding a quantity of water, and then you introduce the fungus into that.
Like a bit of yeast?
Exactly. And then you allow it to ferment for a period. And then once it's reached the properties that you want, you stick it in the oven and you bake it.
No!
So you're baking only at about 60 degrees. That's enough to do what we call denaturing.
And then, okay, but then, denaturing because you're trying to kill the fungus from growing more?
Exactly, yeah.
And then what does the final product look like? Like, would you be able to, does it have the same properties as like a traditional brick?
Well, more towards the foam or medium density fiberboard. But the research that's going on is really trying to improve the properties that can be achieved.
So, sorry, medium density fiberboard, right? Are we talking like garden shed? You could make a garden shed, but not a house.
At the moment, we're really looking at interior materials. So the idea of actually growing a house, which is actually the EU-funded project we had about 5 years ago. The ambition there was to look at the idea that we could grow a house monolithically.
What do you mean by monolithically? Like, as in one?
So in one hit. So instead of growing multiple components and then building them together, could you set up a frame and then literally grow the house? And that turns out to be really challenging because if you want particular kinds of material property, you need to give the fungus particular kinds of condition. And at the scale of a building, you start to have differences in temperature. You've got gradients of gases. And these things begin to affect the properties of the material you're trying to grow. So currently, it's much more feasible to think about making components rather than monolithic houses.
Okay, we're still at the stage of gnome houses then. Gnome houses possible.
Yes, yeah.
Human houses not.
I quite like the idea of you just go, well, we're just going to plant this here, bang, boom, and then we'll come back in 6 months.
The nice thing, Dara, is you wouldn't have to wait 6 months. So this is one of the things that's really interesting about these materials compared to many bio-based materials that we use in architecture. So trees typically take 30 to 50 years to grow. Bamboo is also something that we use quite regularly in architecture. That can grow in a season, but it normally takes about 3 years for the tissues to reach a dense enough maturity. But with mycelium, you can grow products in the space of 2 to 3 weeks. And you can do that continuously, making use of really available waste streams. In this case, it becomes a really nice way of entering into a circular economy, where we can be activating agricultural, forestry, or even other kinds of industrial waste streams as the basis for growing the materials.
I mean, that really does undermine the recurring plot theme in grand designs of things running over a project, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's 3 weeks later. If he comes back 6 months, they go, no, we moved in 5 months ago. the whole thing was done. It was grand.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
All right, so Phil's trying to build things, but our listener Alexis was also interested in things she could use in the home, and there are in fact commercial companies using techniques as described by Phil to make products. Here's the co-founder of an Italian company called Mogu.
Hello everybody, my name is Maurizio Montalti. I'm co-founder and chief mycelium officer of Skim, known as Mogu. Our goal is essentially to disrupt the way things are traditionally made through active partnerships with fungi and with their mycelium. What we do is to deliver biocomposite products that are primarily dedicated to interior design and interior architecture, and they comprise panels for acoustic absorption, wall panels for decorative purposes, as well as flooring solutions. There's different parameters we can affect when growing our mycelium biocomposite, starting from the hydration level of our feedstock, the temperature, and the pH of the substrate itself that makes it suitable and interesting for the fungus to digest it. So we are able, in fact, to guide the growth of the mycelium to create materials of a very even density, color, and overall quality in raw form. That we easily can harvest at the end of the incubation process that takes just several weeks.
Can I just define mycelium?
Yeah, so mycelium is the main body of the fungus.
Right, okay.
It's the bit that grows, it's the bit that eats stuff. It's basically this network of thread-like filaments that branch and connect and mesh together to form this web.
So what we think of as mushrooms, they're just a fruit.
That's just the apple on the tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So the bit that we've thought all this time is the useful bit is actually not the useful bit.
Well, it's pretty useful. Mushrooms are delicious and very nutritious.
Okay, grand, fine. I'm sorry.
I'm never going to hear a bad word about fungi. I'm sorry.
Can I bring out some of the stuff that Mogu have made, by the way? These are some of the... these are the wall panels.
Ooh. Okay, I mean, lighter than you might imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we describe this? It sort of has it's very light. This nice ridged surface. How would you describe that?
Well, see, that I think you can just design. So it looks like a bar of chocolate.
I did not imagine that the mushroom came up with that.
But it does show that basically you can make the fungus grow to whatever mold or shape that you want it to.
Absolutely. So fungi are very amorphous and they will grow in whichever direction the food is.
They'll fill a space that you give them. I mean, they feel a little bit like chipboard to a certain extent.
You are presumably not taking good quality wood and turning it into wood shavings in order to do this, right? This is like scraps and leftovers from other projects.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
So that one's actually made from hemp shiv and cotton residue.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
But also what mycelium is made of is fire resistant, isn't it? You can't set mycelium on fire.
No, so some of the properties of the cell wall of the fungus mean that it is quite fire resistant, and that's just thanks to the long chain molecules that it's made up with. So there's lots of interesting biochemistry if you're a biochemist that means that it's very difficult to set this stuff on fire.
Yeah. Quite useful.
It seems important.
Otherwise, the gnome in their hemp house, the fire protection is going to be
it feels down. Like that's definitely in the pro column rather than the con, that it won't go on fire. So it's light, it's shapeable, and you're using waste product that you otherwise wouldn't be getting use out of.
Yeah, that's it.
And we think it could last and last and last.
Yeah, it should do. Yeah. Fungi, I'll go back. I'll talk about honey fungus, right? So an example of a natural fungus. It's the largest organism on Earth, right? It covers up to 3.5 square miles just of mycelium. As single as a fungus gets. But this mycelial network is thought to be between 2.5 and 8,500 years old. So this stuff lasts.
Yes.
it's pretty
Where is
persistent. Oregon in the USA.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
There's an 8,000-year-old single organism that is 3 kilometres wide. I mean, this...
Yeah, I think it's bigger than... Sorry, it's 3.5 miles.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
And then it's like 8.5 kilometres or something like that.
And it's 8.5 kilometres wide?
Yeah, and it could be 8,500 years old. It's incredible. Like fungi are just absolutely incredible, and you really have to suspend what you think you know about living things.
Yeah. So, right, while we've been playing with these samples, we have snuck another person into the studio because we have been joined by Patrick Baptista Pinto, who is the co-founder of a company called Really Clever. Great name, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so up until now, we've been talking about sort of making bricks and things by growing mycelium through stuff. decaying stuff. But you're doing something different, right?
So what we're essentially doing is we help brands and consumers decarbonize their supply chains by being able to offer a material that can displace any plastic or animal-derived products. So if you can imagine a sneaker or a car seat or a handbag as an example.
You're making mushroom leather.
Mushroom leather. We like to call it a biomaterial, but we can lean into mushroom leather.
Thank you for my purposes of today. But
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, how do you make mushroom leather?
So what we do is we take the stem of the mushroom.
Right.
So there's 3 core components, let's call it, to a mushroom. I know you kill me for this particular definition, but let's say 3 core components. You have the first, which is the mycelium, the root structure under the ground.
That's what we've been talking about, yeah.
Then you have the stem that protrudes from the ground, and then you have the fruiting body that we consume.
Yeah.
Now, for decades, mushroom farmers have had no use for this stem of the mushroom because there's no nutritional content. So what we've been able to do is we've recognized different classes of compounds and molecules that are responsible for a great feeling material. So what these mushroom farming partners do is they take this waste stream, they essentially just compact it, synthesize it, basically this liquid, and ship it to our factory.
Get the stems, put them in a blender, send them to you.
Nailed it.
Right.
So this is one of the core ingredients. We then introduce some other bio-based ingredients, algal-based inputs, natural latex as an example. And the output's kind of a viscous, cake-like mixture biopolymer. So we basically put this liquid into a tray, put it into an oven, it cures, and it comes out like this.
Oh, wow. So you're holding up basically, that looks like suede, leather.
Correct.
It looks like the back of a car seat.
Let me see.
Yeah.
I mean, the feel of it is like, it's sort of somewhere between rubber and leather, right? It's sort of like got the stretchiness and like almost plasticiness of rubber, but then the texture of it across, as you run your hands across it, is very leather-like.
But so you can, maybe you create a thing that can be used in, I'm trying to go to bags, sofas. So where would this stuff appear? What products could this appear in?
So, as a perfect example.
Okay, there's a trainer.
That's a trainer as an example.
And sorry, so am I the leather parts of it here, the leather uppers, let's say, they are made of this?
Correct. So the shoe upper, the material is completely 99% bio-based, and it's gone through all the testing standards.
You could not tell.
I was just going to say, it's just a shoe.
It's just a shoe.
Just a shoe. But then, and how durable is it in comparison to leather?
Yeah, so in terms of leather and synthetic, so plastic materials, it's completely like for like. The only difference between leather and ours is breathable. Leather is naturally breathable, where our material actually isn't.
Fine.
Apart from that, it's the same in every context, from price to performance and quality.
So we are saying there is an increased risk of athlete's foot. Is that?
With this, hopefully not. It's completely hydrophobic, so no moisture comes in.
Oh, sweat from the inside.
Yeah, that's the danger. Yeah, speaking as a teenage boy, formerly, it does feel like it's like a patch of leather.
It's just a shoe. I mean, there's something quite sort of mundane about the output, but I guess that's sort of the point, isn't it, really? So,
of course, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So you're not even thinking about a second time. Okay, so these are some of the products that are appearing now, but I bet you didn't think that this discussion could end up in space, but you're wrong, because NASA are working on this as well. Have a listen to this.
My name is Lynn Rothschild. I'm a senior scientist at NASA Ames Research Center in California. And what we're trying to do is use fungi as a building material to build habitats and other structures off-planet, whether in low Earth orbit or on the Moon or on Mars. When you're working in space, a lot of the cost of the mission is really launching off Earth's gravity well. And so the more that you can take out of what you launch into space, the better. If you launch something that's biological, you could in principle launch very few and then have them grow off planet with, say, water that's sourced locally on the Moon or Mars. And so this should be able to solve a lot of your upmass problem. So our initial plans are to develop inflatables that are space hardy. So I always sort of imagine one of those jumpy things that kids jump in the summer. It can be more of a habitat sort of shape. And you see that with the fungal mycelia and maybe some dehydrated wood chips. But you keep this as low mass as possible. You fold it up and you send it off planet. And at that point, once you get there, you push it out the door. You give it some water that's locally sourced, or maybe you've had to bring a little with you. And then the fungi start to grow and to bind these wood chips or whatever you've sent. Well, we've done prototypes of little tiny cubes. We've made bigger bricks. Chris Maurer, the architect that we're primarily working with, has made some structures that are imitating what we think of off planets, so a 4 by 4 meter dome. And in my lab, we've also made a little stool that my students have made, which doesn't look like much. It's one of those things that only a mother could love, and yet it's gone viral on the internet. In fact, it's gotten to be sort of a classic photo op. People come to my lab and they want their photograph taken standing on this stool. Fungi could have a really, really big role ultimately in space exploration with food, with clothing, with structures, and there are probably a lot of things that I'm not even thinking about yet.
Traditionally, I always go with whatever NASA say, but fungi is not catching on. I wasn't aware that was a thing, that there was a transatlantic difference between fungi, fungi and fungi.
Would you like to see the stool?
I'd like to see the stool, yes.
She described it as a thing that only a mother could love.
Oh my God, no, that's awful. That's absolutely dreadful.
I don't think she's helping with our fungal.
I mean, it's certainly got the hint of decaying matter about it,
yeah. Phil, can I bring you in this? 'Cause this is not dissimilar to what you were talking about, except that this process would happen in space.
I mean, I haven't quite got my head around how it is that they're actually going to be doing that, unless you can create the right atmospheric conditions for the mycelium to grow.
Right, in terms of temperature, in terms of the amount of water you have.
Yeah, humidity, temperature, the right levels of CO2, access to oxygen.
It may be one of these things which, like a lot of things when it comes to this, is dependent on being able to extract water there, and being able to use that, which is a whole other...
I mean, it might just be easier to do it in the Sahara. Do you know what I mean? Don't bother going to space.
Do all that,
much less harsh
and then fly it up in a
Yeah.
rocket made of... fungal rocket, an entirely fungal rocket with a mushroom leather dashboard.
Nice. So that's where we've landed then, is it? So we've got human houses not yet, but mushroom rockets and gnome houses on the moon. That's,
essentially, yeah. That. I mean, I think that would be quite beautiful if just a gnome sitting on top of a toadstool on the moon, looking back, but with a fishing rod, always with a fishing rod.
Realistically then, what are we talking about? 5-10 years time, what can we predict mushroom-based products that will be in the home?
Mushroom-based products in the home. I imagine we're going to see more building materials like we've seen the examples of today. But I think also we're going to see a big increase in the number of fungal-based pharmaceuticals and personal care products.
Phil, would you add anything to that list?
Yeah, I'd say that in terms of your interior, you don't have to wait until tomorrow. They exist now. You've shown some of those products already. I think what we will see is greater diversity in the products that we're producing, and an increase in the kinds of function that they can perform.
Patrick, what do you reckon?
For me in particular, I believe we will, over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll start seeing a lot more sneakers on the market with no plastic and instead featured kind of mushroom leather or mushroom materials in this context. But over the longer term, I think the minute we start adopting and adapting the material ready for electrical vehicles, I think that will be the big growth sector as well. So short term, sneakers, fashion, longer term, automotive and hopefully aerospace.
And a pair of leather trousers for the midlife crisis older man.
For you, I'll do a proof of concept for you, no problem.
Thank you very much. You've been an absolute pleasure to talk with. Thank you very much to Katie Field, to Phil Ayres and Patrick Baptisto Pinto. I mean, has it turned you around on the fungal world?
Does this mean I have to eat mushroom risotto now?
Yeah, I mean, that's the entry level. I mean, if you're going to live in a house, entirely made of fungal material, wearing your fungal clothes, sitting on a fungal couch, yeah, I mean, it really would be ridiculous if you couldn't eat a risotto at the same time.
All right, I'll concede then.
This house is also on the moon, did I mention that? Subscribe to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and make sure you've got push notifications turned on, and we'll let you know as soon as new episodes are available.
How can a celebration of death reframe how we think about losing our loved ones? What can bridges made from tree roots teach us about the future we build for our descendants? And how can a broken object help us with mindfulness when things fall apart? I'm Jack Boswell, and in Something to Declare from BBC Radio 4, I'm going to take you around the world to explore how ancient wisdom and practices from other cultures can help us understand and maybe even improve our lives. I'll be learning about the Mexican Day of the Dead, the Japanese tradition of kintsugi, South African Ubuntu philosophy, and many more. Don't miss Something to Declare from BBC Radio 4, available now on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science.
Do you know what frightens me?
Tell me.
Okay, well, see, I'm a night person. I'm of the night.
A vampire Dara.
I am vampire Dara. Well, I like, for example, I like working at night. My energy levels are quite high till about 3 a.m. That's when I naturally want to go to bed then. Right, okay. This does not fit in with the normal family lifetime. But
are you sitting in your house quietly at sort of 1 a.m. in the morning?
Totally, absolutely,
listening for sounds.
No, I'm not. No, I'm doing work or I'm watching. I'm not like constantly engaging, but I have half an ear because no one else should be up. It's just me. And what would absolutely freak me out will be sleepwalking.
If one of your family
suddenly,
started wandering around.
Oh, yeah, it would totally. I'd be
only to have you creep up on them from behind
with a hurley. I'd be worried about what would happen, but it would be. I think inherently I find sleepwalking kind of frightening. I know people find it comic a lot of the time, but I would find it really petrifying.
But this is you imagining other people sleepwalking and you discovering them.
Yeah.
What about you sleepwalking?
Oh, my sleepwalking would be benign and whimsical. It'd be lovely. It'd be charming and delightful.
Skipping along down the stairs in the middle of the night.
I don't, and sadly I never have. Have you ever?
I think I probably have once or twice, but I'm not like a habitual sleepwalker. However, I do have a friend who was an extreme sleepwalker, who had a number of different incidents. My favourite of which was one night they got up, they went downstairs into the kitchen, and they were dreaming that the kitchen was full of cashew nuts. So they picked up a cashew nut and then they gave it a lick, and it didn't taste like a cashew nut. So they turned on the light, and that was the point when they woke up and realised that they just picked up a slug off the floor and licked it.
Aye. Okay, why are there slugs in their kitchen?
Student house. Long story. But that is our topic for today, because we have been asked to investigate by listener Abigail from Swaffham in Norfolk. She wrote to us, curiouscases@bbc.co.uk, to share some of her experiences with sleepwalking.
I have always talked in my sleep and started sleepwalking in my teens. I remember having a dream about taking the pictures off the wall, and I woke up in the morning and found all of the pictures that had been on the bedroom wall stacked up very neatly against my chest of drawers, it was a really weird experience. I woke up one morning and I'd managed to Google a Turkish language course in my sleep, just as you do. I really want to know why we sleepwalk, what's the mechanics behind it, I suppose, and if any other animals do it, because it doesn't seem like a very good idea.
Well, wide awake with us in the studio, we have Professor Guy Leschner, a consultant neurologist who specialises in sleep disorders.
And Professor Russell Foster, who leads the Sleep and Circadian Neuroscience Institute at the University of Oxford. Russell, we'll get to sleepwalking, but tell us about the different phases of sleep, the different stages.
I mean, for so long, people thought that nothing was going on within the brain whilst we slept. It was essentially being turned off. And then we get to the 1950s, where people sort of were developing electroencephalography, which is the planting of electrodes over the surface of the skull using a sort of a conductive jelly. And that began to show some really interesting changes across sleep. So we go, it's all about describing the electrical activity. So when we're in the wake state and thinking about stuff, you can get 35 cycles per second, so really high frequency. And in deep sleep, that will drop to less than one oscillation, and it'll be a great big oscillation. So on the basis of the sizes and the frequency of electrical activity recorded, you go from a quiet resting state into non-REM sleep, and that's divided into 3 stages, 1, 2 and 3. And 3 is this deep slow wave sleep. Then you switch very rapidly back up to 2 and 1, and then another type of sleep called rapid eye movement sleep, which is when you're essentially paralyzed from the neck down, your eyes are moving underneath your eyelids, and that is sort of where we experience our most vivid and complicated dreams. Then you go back down again into stages 1, 2, 3, then back up to REM, and you can go through these cycles, which last about 70 to 90 minutes, perhaps 4 or 5 every night, ultimately waking up from rapid eye movement REM sleep.
And in each of these phases, are different things being done by the brain or by the body?
Yeah, it's difficult to know precisely what's going on. In fact, one of my friends has said that trying to work out what the brain is doing from EEG is a bit like trying to work out what's going on in a building by looking at when the lights go on and off and the toilets flush. I mean, it's a crude measure, but I have to say, with more recent studies where you've used high density EEG, we're getting a better idea of the localization of different brain activities across the brain.
Can I get to REM, because I think REM might be the point that's important here. The REM, rapid eye movement, is our dream sleep.
Well, that's how it was viewed. Yeah. It's certainly when we have our most complicated and vivid dreams, and we tend to remember those dreams because we're waking from REM sleep. But what's happened over the past few years is that dream-like states have also been reported in non-REM sleep. And so, I mean, you can dream in both states.
And do we think that there is a particular phase of sleep that leads to things like sleepwalking?
It's deep sleep. It's slow wave sleep, and it's in non-REM sleep. Now,
that's the first thing I find surprising. That the time that we know we dream most vividly isn't necessary, so it wouldn't necessarily be linked to sleepwalking.
No, and that's really important because in REM sleep you're paralysed from the neck down. So you don't normally show any movements. In non-REM sleep, you can, and that's where many of the parasomnias, these sorts of strange behaviours of sleepwalking and all the rest of it occur.
All right, so this general process, as you say, that happens on average amongst people is all well and good, but sometimes it goes wrong. And that is, I guess, when you end up seeing them.
Yes, indeed.
Do you have some stories as to what might happen when things go wrong?
I've got lots of stories. You know, the range of what people do is really quite dramatic. On one level, it can be very, very simple. It can be just sitting up in bed and muttering. On other occasions, I've had patients who have driven a car in their sleep, a woman who rode a motorbike in her sleep, people who have...
For real?
As far as we can tell. This is a woman somewhere on the south coast of England who was known to be a sleepwalker. Her first events happened in childhood. And when she was lodging with somebody in her 20s, she had a motorbike that she loved, and she was spotted riding through the streets of where she was living by her landlady, and the landlady reported seeing her at 2 o'clock in the morning clutching her motorcycle helmet and driving around, and she had no recollection whatsoever. And then in later life, very similarly, she had a car rather than a motorbike and was seen driving up and down the seafront at 2 o'clock in the morning. And this caused her so much concern, because obviously she was very worried about the fact that she was driving around in her sleep, that she bought a time-locked safe. So she stored her keys in this time-locked safe, and it would only open after about 6 a.m.
This is the bit that I always find slightly jarring about this. The woman, for example, who was riding a motorbike and then later driving a car. So presumably her eyes are open.
Yes.
So why does that not wake her up? That's the thing I always find. Well, I just associate that with being, with your eyes being open, that's a waking state.
Most people in non-REM parasomnias, particularly when they get out of bed, will have their eyes open. But I think the way to think of these events is not necessarily that they are in sleep. They are as a result of the brain not functioning normally, that parts of the brain are awake and parts of the brain are asleep. So it's not like these individuals are deep asleep. It's just that in this state, the parts of the brain responsible for rational thinking and for memory are switched off.
But they're taking in sensory responses.
Yeah, and they will have conversations. People. It's very common for people to have conversations with others in the bedroom when they're in one of these states. It may not be the most sensible conversation, but they can articulate. They can give full-blown responses. They can interact with their environment. So for example, rewiring or taking pictures and piling them neatly by the side of the bed. These are all fairly complex behaviours that involve interaction with the environment on quite a complex level.
Are they responding to impulses? I mean, do they get up and go to the toilet, for example? Is that a...
Yes, going to the toilet. I've seen people cook meals. I've seen people eat stuff that they wouldn't normally eat during the day. A range of incredibly complex behaviour. And the way that I think of it is that actually the majority of their brain is probably awake at that time because of the complexity of what it is that they're doing. But there remain some core parts of the brain that are in very deep sleep, which is why they don't remember these events.
In terms of the complexity of activities that people can potentially do, there is actually an extraordinary case that I want you to hear, because this is a chap who manages to earn a living in his sleep. Have a listen to this.
So my name's Lee Stuart Hadwin, and most people know me now around the world as the sleep artist. From about the age of 4 or 5, I used to get up as a kid and just, generally sleepwalk. My mum and dad had a little area underneath the stairs, cupboard, so I used to always go in there and play. And I just started scribbling on the walls. And then when I was around about 14, 15 years of age, I'd got up in the middle of the night, and the next day I'd drawn three very small Marilyn Monroe drawings. I think because I was in high school and there was a lot of the Marilyn Monroe merchandise around back in the late 80s, and it sort of went from there really, because my artistic level in school wasn't the best. So it was from that stage really where the drawing started becoming a lot more intricate, and what I was producing in my sleep I can't produce whilst I'm awake. Sometimes I can do 2 drawings in a week, and then I might go 6-7 months without drawing anything. And I've had a period before, like for 2 or 3 years, where I've not drawn anything. I sort of go through stages. I went through a stage just drawing fairies and sort of the female form. And then there's a section where it's just lines. Because at the moment I've been doing noughts and crosses for the last 3 years. So I don't know where that's come from. So I've got like 40 pieces of just noughts and crosses. So a lot of my friends, they take the mickey out of me and keep saying who won the game.
Do you want to see a picture of some of the stuff he's drawn?
Yeah, show me.
It's pretty remarkable. Some of it's quite good, right? Here you go. It's quite abstract, that one there. This one here. This is a sort of motif of different fairies.
But it's quite complicated, which is what I wasn't what I was expecting, I'll be honest.
He's got actually consistent lighting on his fairies.
But the detail. I mean, I've always presumed that if you're doing these kind of episodes, you're quite clumsy, and this is very fine detail.
It is. Like up on the wings there.
Oh, delightful, Gossamer.
That's very pretty.
Yeah.
$13,250.
Wow. Okay, fine.
Impressive, but not that impressive.
You're not paying for that much for it. No, handy though to wake up and bank 13 grand.
Ka-ching.
Yeah.
What do you think of this?
Well, look, I think people can do some extraordinarily complicated things at night, as I've already said.
But do something that they couldn't do while awake.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So certainly there are patients who describe things that they do at night that they feel that they could not do during the day, in terms of, for example, exhibiting strength. So breaking objects that they really don't have the strength to do during the day. The other good example of that is in patients with Parkinson's disease. They frequently act out their dreams. They exhibit this condition, REM sleep behaviour disorder. And they will often be very weak, very slow, unable to walk, speaking very slowly during the day. But when they act out their dreams at night, their voices will be strong, their movements will be quick. And so it illustrates the fact that there are certain parts of the brain that are probably bypassed in sleep that during the day may cause problems. And so that in itself would not necessarily make me cynical about this. I mean, I guess I'd be quite keen to get his brainwaves whilst he's drawing these pictures.
Well, he's only doing noughts and crosses now.
Well, noughts and crosses, okay, well, they're not going to sell for £4,000.
So does this seems quite atypical. The artistry, how it seems quite atypical. To create something complicated that would take time to do. I mean, how long are episodes normally?
Well, they can vary enormously. So we tend to have longer REM episodes during the second half of the night than compared to the first half of the night. But what would you say, Guy? I mean, an episode of slow wave sleep can be, 10, 15 minutes?
20 minutes at a maximum. Although, there are some non-REM parasomnias that have been described that go on for an hour or two. I mean, if you look at some of the legal literature, so there's a very famous case from Canada from the 1980s or 1990s, a chap called Kenneth Parks, who allegedly drove 20-odd miles, murdered his mother-in-law, tried to murder his father-in-law, and apparently did all of that in a sleepwalking event. Now, you can choose to believe that or not, but certainly there are some individuals who exhibit non-REM parasomnias that do go on for quite some time.
And if normally, do the episodes end with somebody turning around from wherever they are and going back to bed, or does their brain move to a different phase of sleep and they just, wherever they are, go into this next phase of sleep?
Found at the scene of the crime.
Essentially, yes. Is that what happens?
All of the above.
Right.
You can end up essentially waking up and not knowing what you've done, somewhere completely distant, or you can go back to bed and have, again, no recollection of what you've been up to. I certainly terrified my parents, and when I was about 7, I woke up, but I was clearly having a parasomnia episode, went out of the bedroom, peed in my mother's shopping basket, then went into the sitting room and asked my father, "Where's Mummy?" And then they guided me back to bed. I don't know what they did about the shopping basket, but anyway.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
Okay, so these are the very unusual instances, murder, shopping baskets, etc. Not to bundle them into the same category, of course. But there has been some really careful research on much more common types of sleepwalking. And of course, this is quite difficult to study in a lab. I'm sure you would attest. But Professor Francesca Ciclari from the Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience has found a way to do it.
So the idea was to study consciousness in sleepwalkers. We invited them to the lab. We equipped them with high-density EEG to record brain activity. We had them come for 2 nights. A first night where they just slept uninterrupted by us. And then the following night, they were not allowed to sleep. So we did a total sleep deprivation. And then when they entered slow-wave sleep, so the deep sleep, we would play very loud sounds through the computer until the participants either woke up or in some cases presented a parasomnia episode. One of the hallmarks of these experiences was waking up with the impression that something was about to happen, usually something terrible, and that they still had time or were in a position to prevent this from happening. One participant stood up on the bed and she started to touch the wall next to the bed, and then she later reported that she had the impression that there were ladybugs on the wall, falling down the wall, and she was trying to catch them to save them from falling and from dying. There was another participant. She told us she had the impression that a piece of furniture was actually going to come down on her. But what was interesting is that when we interviewed participants, they almost never mentioned the sound. What was also interesting is that these patients, especially during the first night where we did not play the sounds, had spontaneous episodes where they just spontaneously had exactly the same type of behaviors. And so whatever we did with the sound is probably something that mimics what happens naturally in the brain in these patients.
That's some extraordinary research, Russell. So actually to find a way to get people to do it in the lab.
I think it's fantastic. And we were talking about, EEG in the early days was pretty crude. This is a high-density EEG. So So Francesca's beginning to work out which areas of the brain are actually being active during these parasomnias. And it is a phenomenal, because, these people are acting out their parasomnia. And what they've shown, I think, beautifully, is that the areas that are being activated during a parasomnia are very like the areas that will be activated during a dream.
But then going back to what you were saying about rapid eye movement and your most sort of narrative-based dreaming, as it were, if this is non-REM sleep, but then these people are not in like zombie-like states. They have stories going on in their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fascinating because there's been some very interesting work about what REM sleep dreaming might be doing. And so some fascinating studies have shown that after the Twin Towers were destroyed by terrorist action, people were having vivid dreams, but not of planes going into skyscrapers, but it was being attacked. It was being overwhelmed by a tsunami. So this great emotional sort of state was essentially being integrated into a dreamlike state and presumably playing out, those emotional experiences. So in fact, dreams are not a replication of the event. That would be post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a way of the brain come to terms with rather vivid and striking emotions.
Which is why I guess dreams don't always make sense.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
But you mentioned something really important, which is that there is a qualitative difference for most people between the dreams that you have in non-REM sleep and in REM sleep.
Yes.
So in REM sleep, they tend to be more narrative. They tend to have one thing happening, then another, and then another, whereas actually the clip that you played of Francesca, that she was describing the experiences of one of the patients in her study, is very characteristic of non-REM parasomnia dreams. They're usually little vignettes, visual imagery, not often associated with hearing anything or talking to anybody. So actually just by talking to individuals about what it is they're experiencing, that can sometimes be really, really helpful in trying to work out what is actually going on.
It's important to note, by the way, that even though we described how Francesca did the experiment, we are not recommending that you play a loud sound to your partner if you happen to be awake and they're not, in the hope of creating an event like this.
Unless you're carrying a hurling stick.
Yeah, and are armed and ready to do the situation. We may have created the perfect recipe for you to induce this, but that's not the intention of this part. That not at all. What we want to do.
It's interesting you were saying about the playing the noises. Actually, people often do that for themselves, in that we do sometimes see individuals who have these kinds of events when their mobile phone next to them buzzes in the middle of the night, or if they're living in the Heathrow flight path when a plane goes overhead. So environmental noise, actually in some individuals, is a very good trigger for these kinds of events. Occasionally, I have seen one individual who only had these events when their partner rolled over in bed and they were in a very creaky bed. And so the creaking of the bed was what triggered off these parasomnia events.
I love that they've made it the partner's fault.
But it's actually really fascinating because, in Francesca's experiments, she sleep deprived and induced the parasomnia when these individuals were in slow wave sleep. And as I understand it, you're much more likely to have parasomnias if you are chronically tired, or if you're on certain medications, or alcohol, I guess.
Exactly.
I mean, you're presumably getting lots of patients who may well be perhaps alcoholics and having parasomnias. I don't know.
I think there are lots of people who will get parasomnias when they've been out drinking.
Yeah.
I mean, are we counting those as I'm sorry, not to dismiss that behaviour, but I know lots more stories about people who do things after they've been drinking and then they're asleep. I mean, but does that still fall under parasomnia?
Well, I think that is a medico-legal minefield.
Okay.
But there are certainly individuals who will have non-REM parasomnias anyway, but for whom even a couple of glasses of wine or a beer or two might make it much more likely for a non-REM parasomnia to occur.
I'm specifically thinking of a friend of mine who saw another friend of mine cross the room in a house share at the Edinburgh Festival once and open his laptop and then proceed to use the laptop for something the laptop was not designed for at all. But he thought
it was a seated activity.
Yes, and they basically thought the laptop was the lid of the toilet, and the other guy screamed at him just in time and stopped that. So that's going into Brendan.
Okay, so let's say you're for some reason not keen on peeing in baskets or riding motorcycles naked. I didn't actually remember the nakedness being part of your story. But
I think you just made that up, but I quite like the sound of that.
Makes it more salacious, doesn't it? Okay, what can you do if you want to avoid this happening? Because there will be people listening to this where there is a kind of constant concern of this happening.
So I think that there are some, very straightforward things that you can do. You can try and work out what the triggers are, if there are triggers. So if you've got a creaky bed, oil the bed, for example. Making sure that you're not sleep deprived. Making sure that if alcohol is a trigger for you, trying to go easy on the alcohol. There are medications that we can give, but a lot of it is about lifestyle advice. And if all else fails, or you are putting yourself in danger, then that would be the time to consider medication.
Oh, okay. So that would be rather than, I'm trying to think what the other option would be, like whatever that. If you had something that you rose from the bed and then it triggers something for lights to go on or for music to play to wake you up, an alarm to go off to wake you up.
Well, I think we certainly recommend alarms for people who have got themselves into trouble by leaving their house in the middle of the night. So a door alarm in the middle on their bedroom door, for example, making sure that you've got locks on the windows, some really, really simple things.
These are too simple for me, though. What I want is an alarm system that if I roll out of bed at the wrong time when I'm sleepwalking, I want disco lights. I want trumpeters.
I was thinking of that. The whole thing would
confetti.
Yeah, we go mad. Like you'd launch like a huge ba-dam, a ta-da moment would occur. Which I think long term
in musical theatre.
Long term in a relationship that would be quite difficult if you're constantly woken by your partner.
I'm not sure my wife would be particularly keen to have confetti thrown over her in the middle of the night.
Every second now. Here we go with the confetti gun again.
But she creaked the bed though, so
at least 50% of this issue. The animals. Our questioner asked about animals. Are we the only animal that does this?
Well, in terms of the primates, we don't have sleepwalking described in any of the primates that have been discovered so far. However, there's some really exciting stuff that's emerged over the past few years, which is different sleep states and a potential REM-like sleep state in a great variety of animals. So the jumping spider, for example, has a particular position and it has movement of the eyes, just kind of like REM eye movements, and then there's the cuttlefish, which is showing again a particular posture, but it's showing wake-like states in terms of its changing colour patterns. So it's raised some interesting issues. I mean,
what does a jumping spider dream?
Well, that's it. Because
is it a bird? Is it in the Olympics? What is this?
Well, it gets to the whole issue of consciousness. And so is there a chance of consciousness in really animals we'd never have thought of having consciousness? Maybe primates, of course, and perhaps some of the octopuses. But
because we know that dolphins, for example, other animals sleep with one half of their brain at the time.
Unihemispheric sleep. Yeah, absolutely. So they can keep on moving, as do other. It's really fascinating. Some of the seals, they will have biphasic sleep, both hemispheres on land, and then when they return to the water, it'll be unihemispheric sleep. So it's an adaptation for keeping moving. And
migratory birds, presumably.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So this is like their fuse box has a line down the middle, I guess. Yeah, so you can switch them all on one side or the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it shows the fundamental need for sleep, of course, as well.
Yeah, that absolutely cannot be avoided, even if you have to do a 4,000-mile flight to Africa. You still need to get a bit of a rest on the way. Gentlemen, it's an excellent conversation. I've not been awake for any of this. So it's
between me and Dara, we're the seal, right? Yeah. Between us, we make one brain.
So I'm hoping when I hear back that I made some sense. And it's as enjoyable the second time as it was the first time. Thank you to Russell Foster and to Guy Leschziner for your excellent contributions. So Abigail, who set the original question to start this, are we basically saying you've got to set up a confetti gun and disco lights in your room?
Set it up with a series of wires, trap wires,
trip
wires,
or pressure pads around the bed.
Absolutely. And then numerous guns pointed directly
over the bed. Yeah.
Lights. Also, I think an alarm that moment you and I burst out of the cupboards.
Yeah. Ba-ba-ba-bam! And they're there. You're awake.
Yeah. Solved.
Every night. Watching Abigail sleep.
It's quite a big commitment from us, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Why are we signing up for that?
The other option, less effort, just accept that different bits of your brain are going to be on and off at different times.
That's the way the fuse board works, isn't it? Subscribe to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and make sure you've got push notifications turned on, and we'll let you know as soon as new episodes are available.
Hello, I'm Greg Jenner. I'm the host of You're Dead to Me, the Radio 4 comedy show that takes history seriously. And we are back for Series 8, starting with a live episode recorded at the Hay Literary Festival, all about the history of the medieval printed book in England. Our comedian there is Robin Ince. And then we'll be moving on to the life of Mary Anning, the famous paleontologist of the 19th century, with Sarah Pascoe. Then it's off to Germany in the 1920s for an episode on LGBTQ life in Weimar, Germany, with Jordan Gray. And then we'll hop on a ship all the way back to Bronze Age Crete to learn about the ancient Minoans with Josie Long. Plus loads more. So if that sounds like fun, listen and subscribe to You're Dead to Me on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.